What happened this season? The good, the bad, the lessons learned, many as always, and now is the time that we are going to go through them. Hey everyone, Natissa here, and welcome to You Can Grow Too, and to the review of the 2024 into 2025 fall and winter season. And here in the subtropics, we grow a lot of our gardens through our fall and winter. It's just a better time for us. It is better weather, the sun is not as intense and hot, and for me, what I appreciate is lesser bugs. And with all that said, that makes us able to grow a lot of the crops that maybe some of us are trying to grow in the spring and summertime. And as always, I do have my dogs with me, always going in and out. And our darling puppy Luna Bell is hopefully going down for a nap. I have my notes here and we shall get started. And we will start with the fall plant starts. I actually seed started this year and I had a couple of videos I put up on the process of that. And part of that was using half peat moss and half sand. And that actually did work out very well. I did use sand from my backyard, and with that there is risk for weed seeds, and also I had something else in that sand, I'm pretty sure, that kind of made the whole mix quite smelly, which ended up going away not too long after, but yeah, that was a little rough start. Also, I did not moisten my seed starting mix, and that is a huge no-no. And I explained why in round number 1, why I didn't do that, and then later I realized, yeah, you need to do that, and I forgot that I always do, but like I said, I explained it in that video. But bottom line, always moisten that seed starting mix. And I felt kind of funny of making such a mistake, but I'm glad that I did it because I was able to show what I did to make that better. So it all worked out in the end. It was also amongst this time that my seedlings were getting very leggy, and I admit that was on me. Still, even now, I didn't adjust my lighting, but when you have a bunch of seedlings growing together and they start competing for light, they're going to get leggy, and that is a problem. And I plan to do a video on that in the near future. But that happened, and I kept saying, oh, I'll get to it, I'll, start dividing them and making selections. And gosh, not a lot of time has gone by, and it really got pretty bad. But, if you've seen the tours, a lot of those seedlings were those leggy ones, and we've had great success still. But it was a bit of a stress, and yeah, it happened, part of the season. So as those seedlings were going, we needed to start getting them outside. They were getting too big for their containers, and specifically the tomatoes. And I was also seeing some disease on them as well. I think that had to do with the humidity that, I still have humidity inside the house. They were also going outside, which wasn't helping because this is still a big part of our summertime when we start growing our tomatoes. And I think I did get them wet, so that didn't help. So there were disease and they were getting larger. I had to get them outside. And the day that I planned on planting them, we learned that there was a hurricane on the way, Hurricane Helene. And so that kind of delayed my planting of the tomatoes. And our power went out for a handful of days, which did not help the seedlings at all. No circulation, more humidity in the house. I did start planting after that hurricane, but I usually do it in stages, and I'm glad that I did because not long after that was Hurricane Milton, and it was projected at one point to be a Category 5 coming right at us. And as the days started approaching, my husband and I decided we needed to evacuate, and that was a whole other thing. Never evacuated before. And we came back to our seedlings in the dark, and shockingly, yeah, some died, but some did make it. So I was able to start planting those outside. It was off camera because our power was out, conserving energy. But we did a lot of planting of those seedlings and seeds when we got back. And something I didn't do was I did not amend the garden beds with compost. I do that every fall and winter. My husband and I will buy big loads of it and just lay it on the beds. And I think in my excitement and frustration of, wanting to get planting, but frustrated because of the hurricanes, I just started putting plants and seeds in the ground. But something I did notice back when we started our fall season was that the chop and drop I had done in the summertime, that was breaking down, and I started seeing a fine layer of compost starting to build on the surface. So that really encouraged me that maybe I could start planting and trust that bit of compost that was starting to form on the tops. And it seemed to work out very well. It's something that I'm thinking about now in the future. Less buying and more maybe chop and drop. It's appearing to work. So the big thing happening once the seeds got in the ground, and a number of weeks after that, it was lots of watering. Have to keep that ground moist, and I really have a hard time doing that because I do have sandy soil. I have a large garden. I'm sure that's part of my issues. A lot of resources need to go into keeping things going well enough so we can grow our food. But yeah, a lot of watering. That was where all the attention went. But then a lot of the crops we were growing were a lot of our leafy greens. So we started getting some early harvest, which was very encouraging. So a lot of attention going into watering and a bit of harvesting. But on December 4th, we adopted a puppy, Lunabelle, whom you've seen in the videos, who you're probably going to see coming in and out. Hopefully she's still napping. But a lot of attention went and is still going into tending to her, tending to Minu, our adult dog, and we have birds in the house as well, and there's just, life. Life is still happening. I'm not gardening all the time. So immediately the priorities started to shift, and a lot of things that I normally would have been doing to keep up in the garden, I didn't. But we were getting a lot of harvest still. And that was a big lesson, I think, for this season, and that was to just do it. And now that she's been with us a couple of months, gardening has really changed for me. I used to be able to focus on a lot of certain tasks in the garden that now I'm just kind of going out there and doing. And I've noticed for me that I sometimes base my success of gardening on how I'm feeling. If it just doesn't feel pretty, or if it doesn't feel ideal, I start thinking that I'm failing, and that's really not the case. And I think a part of it has to do with when we're watching other gardeners, and maybe when you watch my videos, I don't know. I don't try to portray it as perfect. It's very much real life. It feels like to me as I'm doing it. And, we watch other people harvest and grow, and everything looks so organized, and they're doing it in such an organized fashion, and there's nice music playing. It might be a beautiful day. They might be wearing a cute outfit, who knows what. And it just looks like it's all working out well. And, it makes you feel good watching those videos. And then sometimes when you get in there and start doing it, it's not always that pretty. And with Lunabelle, a lot of what I was doing was just going out and doing it. Sometimes even filming. I mean, here I am sitting on the floor. I don't have the best setup because of her right now and just a few other things going on. And I'm just doing it. In the garden, half of what I was doing was just on the fly. I grabbed clippers. Oh, let's spend a few minutes trimming those tomatoes that really need it. Let's just quickly pop in some of these seedlings that need to get in the garden now. And here I am wearing these tattered clothes filled with holes from puppies. And, it just didn't always feel that good. But we were doing it, and we're still harvesting. And that is the point. It's not always going to feel good. But when I just let go and just did it, it brought about a freedom in me, and also less of a pressure that I was putting on myself that was really unneeded. And I want to carry this into the spring and summer as well. So that was a lot of the beginning and going into the middle of the season. And now we're going to talk about the goals. I had set garden goals for myself for this fall and winter season, and one of them was mulching. And wow, that did not go as planned, I'll tell you that. Where we get our mulch, you might have programs in your county as well. I know we do a couple of places that give it for free. And I was expecting so much mulch because of the hurricanes. There was so much debris, like branches, sticks, and all that piled up all over the place. into the parks where we get a lot of our free mulch, and I thought for sure we were going to be able to get that mulch in and start building our garden up for spring and summer. And yeah, that's where I depended on a lot of my mulch to come from, and we didn't get one load. So I mean, I don't know exactly what happened there. Maybe they're still cleaning up after the hurricanes, because just because it's not in our news doesn't mean it's not done. There's a lot of people who are still in very difficult situations because of Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. So it's stuff still happening, but mulching and having that available to the public was not one of them. So this really pressed into me, and it's something we've already been trying to do, is to produce mulch on our property. And that's why I talk a lot about chop and drop, or you'll see a lot of the perennial Mexican sunflowers growing on our property, because we do a lot of chop and drop of that as well. And now another problem we have come across was where we get our mulch. There has been like an outbreak of ticks. I know we have ticks here in Florida, but gosh, I can count on one hand how many times I've come across one in the span of practically 10 years. And in just a couple days of going out and walking our dog at this park, we have come home with a few on us, like each time. So I don't want to bring ticks into the garden with that mulch. So again, this has been evidence to me of the importance of trying to produce what we need off of our property. I know we can't do it all, but we can still do a lot. So that is something, it didn't go the way I planned, but it just made us want to focus more on doing it ourselves. And we're also doing this with our new lawnmower. Our old one had broken down, thankfully, because with our new lawnmower, we're able to capture the grass and things that we mow, and we're able to use that as mulch. And you don't have to just use grass clippings. We are planning to use certain plants in our garden to kind of mow over it, to chop it down, and like I said, make our own mulch. So that's exciting. Succession sowing was another goal that we wanted to accomplish, and we've had great success with that. Some of them did not make it through, at least the first plantings, because of the hurricane, which, yeah, that's okay. I accept that. But one of the biggest successes in our succession sowing was lettuce. I've never started lettuce before I used a 16 cell. They're very, very small, but it worked very well for the lettuce. So that helped us harvest lettuce earlier than we've ever had before. Then I was able to succession sow the lettuce, so every couple months I had a new batch of lettuce going, got it out in the garden, so as the first batch started to bolt, we had new lettuce coming in. And it is, presently as I film this, it is late February, and I still have lettuce out there. And last year, according to my tours, all my lettuce had already bolted. I think it was in December, and it was already done. And I considered it done. I didn't think we'd ever have lettuce again, because in the past I would always just plant, harvest, and consider that the season. But this year, the success of succession sowing has shown me that I can keep some of our crops going throughout the season, and lettuce is one of them. And we did this also with Chinese cabbage. My goodness, I so disappointed. I think I did have a batch of Chinese cabbage growing in starts, but the hurricanes ruined that, so I just threw some seeds in the ground. And we did get wonderful Chinese cabbage in the garden. And as I was harvesting them, I did not notice, but they were infested with aphids really bad. And, I have pests on my food all the time. I wash it off. That's part of organic gardening. But it was just way too much for me, so I instead composted them. You never want to compost your food because you want to eat it. But composting it is a very responsible way in dealing with waste, I guess you could say, in the garden, because that's going to help feed the garden for next year. But what I had ready to go was my succession sown Chinese cabbage, and I got them out in the garden. And some of them didn't work in the buckets. We'll talk about that later, but I did get some out in the garden. Some didn't grow as well as I'd hoped because I think the placement, and I didn't water them as well because I was very busy. But there was a Chinese cabbage that worked wonderfully in the garden beds, and I picked that and ate it early before the bugs came in, and it was wonderful. And we will be talking about that cabbage more a little later. But yes, the succession sowing, gonna do that next year. I have seen how we are able to have more food earlier and later into the season. Fresh eating, that was another goal that we had. I watch a lot of other gardeners, how they preserve their garden produce, and that's a great skill. I definitely want to do that sometime in the future, but I've noticed again the pressure getting to me, feeling like I kind of had to do that. And this season I thought, you know what, we're just going to focus on fresh eating because I can grow here actually year round. Sometimes seasons are better than others, like our fall and winter time, but I wanted to focus on just enjoying the good food from the garden instead of feeling like I had to make sauce or salsa or, doing a lot of this or that and make all these things. Just do what we normally like to do in the garden. I harvest a lot of greens and we eat a lot of it cooked. A lot of our root crops, just cooking it in soups. I'm going to be making our annual turkey soup in a couple of days, so we'll be getting a lot of the carrots out of the ground. And the tomatoes, had a lot of them, but we use it a lot for fresh eating. And that's something that really kind of relieved my mind again, made me feel free instead of feeling like I had to do certain things. But with that freedom and with that relaxation inside, I still did do some preserving, and it's actually an experiment I'm working on in how to preserve the cassava root. It's a tropical root crop and it doesn't store well at all. In fact, it really starts going bad after a couple of days of harvesting it. So I've been working on a way to preserve it. So far it's looking like it's working. And I also had a little goal with myself. Again, I didn't put the pressure on myself, but because of that no pressure, it made me actually want to do these things, as weird as it sounds. But I also started dehydrating my moringa, and my goal is to try to get like a bottle of it dried and powdered to the best of my abilities so I can have it during summer when sometimes I don't want to go out there. One of my other goals was to use the not so ideal spacing. I did a lot of it by my back door because I saw success last year in just throwing a couple plants there that I had extra, and I found that I can grow there. It is a very shady area in the fall and winter time, but I've had success with my giant kohlrabis, with, believe it or not, tomatoes, and this year I had some self-seeded Chinese cabbage, and I'm thinking of doing more of that, continue doing more of that next year, just because I see that as a potential good growing area. And it's not ideal, like I said. The sun doesn't really shine there much during the fall and winter, so really consider those spaces. I was not able to do the south side of my house where my carport is. I actually have a hard time finding things that grow there well, although I am finding some things that are doing pretty good. But I want to see what kind of fall and winter crops that I'll be able to do there. Because I've done it once before and had success, but I just haven't followed up with it each year because I get so busy with my main growing area. But I did have what I like to call success on a slope. And I just dug in a garden bed toward my street. And I don't even think I amended it with anything. And our native soil is actually just basically sand. And in the summer, I grew roselle and didn't amend it, I don't think, at all. The roselle didn't grow well, but it was because the tree starts filling in with its leaves. We had a passion fruit vine there, so the sunlight really wasn't coming in. But I did chop and drop that, threw a lot of the other chop and drop on that garden bed to help amend it, and in the fall I planted the kohlrabi starts there. My leggy kohlrabi starts in there. Also marigolds, nasturtiums, and some carrot seeds. It was pelleted seed. It didn't really come up too well, but we had great success. In fact, so far I did harvest my largest kohlrabi at this point. I do grow giant kohlrabis, but my largest one yet. So that was in just my not so ideal, not amended at all, success on a slope. And being it is on a slope, I believe the rainwater that comes down that would normally go into the road is being caught up in that garden bed, so that is helping. And also, a lot of sand gets washed away down into the road, and you don't want that in your sewer system. You don't want to lose that sand where your house is sitting on. So I'm really liking what I'm seeing with this not so ideal space. by the road and not being amended at all, it's doing pretty good. And a goal that I actually did not have written down on paper, but it is so important, and that is to enjoy your garden. I had a very, very rough season in my summertime, and usually that is the rough season for us. It's just way too hot, don't want to go out there, the bugs. But this season, I really made it a point to enjoy my garden. And like I said, being busy with our puppy Lunabelle and just in everyday life, yeah, I could have gone out, and there were times maybe I should have done this or that in the garden, but I chose to just sit on the bench and just enjoy the garden, enjoy the beauty that was around me. And still, yeah, I had to go out and do some things, because you have to do some work out in the garden in order to get a harvest that you are looking for. But the enjoyment was so important, and I just... yeah, things started looking crazy, and they will always look crazy in my garden, but if you don't enjoy it, if you don't enjoy your garden, why are you doing it? Even though, yes, a lot of it is to grow our own food and to learn how to do that, but enjoying it is part of the process to help me do that. The experiments in the garden, we had quite a few. Last season in late summer, I had a self-seeded pepper plant, and it grew through our fall and winter time, and it did horrible. But when spring came and the sun started going onto it, the warmth started coming, that pepper plant was one of the best growing ones I had. And all the ones that I planted out like right before spring, they did all right, but that pepper plant that grew through our fall and winter did well. And I think it was because it had time to develop a root system before all of our heat came in. So I thought, I'm going to do this on purpose this year. And I planted our peppers, our eggplants, even watermelon in our late summer plantings to have it grow through fall and winter and see what would happen. And we had a colder winter, I think. And a lot of our peppers and eggplants do not look good at all. The watermelon didn't really make it, but it also got overgrown. But it did work well last year, the watermelon. It did decent, I should say. The experiment is still not done. Those plants are outside. They look like they're starting to put on new growth. And maybe if I cut them back and as it warms up, it might do very well. We'll see. Also, my bitter melon timing in its planting and how I planted it, that experiment did well. Before, I also tried planting that in the spring going into summer, and last year it did not work out at all. But this year, end of summer, instead of putting those seeds in the ground or in seed starting mix, I germinated them in a warm, damp cloth I used was a pie tin, and that kept that humidity in there, and that germinated my seeds wonderfully. In fact, I actually broke the taproot of one of those seedlings that was germinating, and I still planted it, and guess what? It grew, and it grew a lot of fruit. So that was a very encouraging thing this season, was that bitter melon. And again, the timing. Sometimes it's all about the timing. Probably my favorite experiment this season, and it was growing in nothing but sand. And I started this experiment actually it was early summer. And like I said, it is sand. That is my native soil. And I used nothing but what was on the property of what most of us can get a hold of. Food waste, paper waste, made some compost tea, and well, I'm planning to make a video of it, so I won't go too far into it, but I will say this is it did wonderfully, and I still have harvests I can get out there right now. So what a success this experiment is. So that was one of them. And along with, I don't know if you want to call it an experiment, but like I said, with the leggy seedlings, I want to do a video of the life of a leggy seedling, from its little leggy seedling stage all the way to harvest, because I don't know, I get very nervous when I do seed starting, and I'm always second guessing myself and everything that's happening. And so many times things work out pretty good considering. So I'm hoping to do that video for you. So I don't know, like I said, I don't know if you call that an experiment, but it is, you know, really paying attention and watching and following it this season. I've never done that before. Another thing I tried this year was revitalizing the soil in my food container garden with nothing but grass clippings. And that also turned out pretty good considering. I did have to add sand into it to kind of help with the drainage, and I'm sure it depends on what you're planting in it to help with your success. But with my leafy greens, did very well, and I'm hoping to do a video on that too. And the last experiment that I did this season, I actually started it last year, and it was a seed saving experiment. I had a lot of different plants out in the garden going to seed, and I saved the seed and planted them out this year. And I will tell you what, it turned out, I did expect some crossing, of course, but not as much crossing as I got. And like I said, I plan to do a video on that as well. I think, I don't know, it kind of changed the way that I am going to be collecting seed from now on. The last topic that we'll go over now is the harvest, the review of the harvests. Last year, our passion fruit did so well, maybe too well. But the hurricanes this year really messed up the plant really bad. We lost a lot of fruit, and even a lot of the fruit that was still on the plant, shockingly, just, gosh, didn't really ripen quite right. And I'm pretty sure it was because of the plant just being completely obliterated by 2 hurricanes back to back. That's not going to help. And then having cooler weather on it. I look up at that tree and I just see like nothing but dead foliage, and it just does not look good. And your plants need to be good in order to ripen up its fruit properly. So passion fruit was not that good this season, but that happens. That's gardening. The tomatoes, they are coming in, but they were planted out late, again due to the hurricanes. It was amazing to see how much just a few weeks can really kind of make or break the harvest of the tomatoes, because last year I got them out, I think it was mid-September, and I remember talking about in a video how I was already getting blooms and it wasn't even October yet, and here we were not even having our seedlings out yet. This year, because of the hurricanes, everything was just kind of delayed. Last year we also were getting our tomatoes in by December, and here we were getting our tomatoes in probably, I have to look back at my footage, but we were just getting a couple cherries here and there maybe in January, and we actually did get a couple of larger ones recently, which was nice, but definitely not like last year. But it's still something to think about as far as how much we did, because last year I did say how we actually had too many tomatoes, because again, I'm not preserving, that's something I'm not focusing on. We're just doing fresh eating, and this time around, maybe it's on the brink of being too much for fresh eating. So maybe this hurricane was a blessing in disguise, because it kind of showed me that, you know, maybe I need to scale down the tomatoes a little bit. But we'll see. I think I like watching tomatoes grow more than eating them, so no promises for next year, but yeah, try to maybe scale back. But still, like I'm saying, still a decent harvest considering all the hurricane issues. Our broccoli, last year we had broccoli, not as much as I was hoping for, but we did have one plant. But gosh, it is, like I said, late February, not one bit of broccoli out here yet. And I think part of that might have to do with that it's growing in shade. If I grew it in the sun, it might, I guess it would be putting stress on the plant, and then it would go to flower, because with broccoli, that's what you're eating is flower buds. So I think our broccoli is a little too happy right now. Same with our, what I believe is a Romanesco out there. There's just no sign of anything happening with it. And it is late February, and I planted these, I think it was early September. So that's quite a while. So maybe I need to plant my broccolis and Romanescos in the sun, because they might need to be nudged along a little bit more. Again, we had success with our beans, with our bush beans. I tried pole beans again. I don't know why. Pole beans just don't seem to do well for me. I even did the rattlesnake pole bean. Actually, that was starting to do well, but we had fruit rats, I'm pretty sure anyways, come and just eat down a lot of those plants. But our bush beans in the raised beds did very well. And I'm actually succession sowing beans for the first time, and some success with that too. I think it's just the dragon tongue that came up in the raised bed. I did pop some seeds in ground in more of my sandier soils, and it was very dry. But we've had a couple of really good rains lately, so I'm hoping we'll have a couple surprise bean plants coming up. But I'm also planting out a lot of our spring seedlings right now. And some of those spaces where the beans were planted are my only ready places. So we'll see about those beans. But the ones in the bed are doing all right. And what really helped those harvests that we've been getting, all our successes, like I said earlier, was the succession sowing. And with our lettuce, we eat a lot of salads, so the succession sowing has just really put us in lettuce longer than ever before. And some of the seedlings that I started inside that I normally direct sow later, I had started plants going into the garden, and that gave us earlier harvests, which make perfect sense, of course. But it's making me think for next year about doing more started plants, get more of a harvest earlier on. And like I said, with our succession sowing, if anything bolts or goes bad, we always have another plant going in. So I'm really thinking about that for next year. What also helped, especially with the lettuce, is variety. It depends on the variety that you use. And I got this seed packet from the Urban Harvest, and it is supposed to be lettuces that do better in heat and fluctuating temperatures. And it seems to do well. A lot of my lettuces are... well, some of them are bolting, but there are a few that I planted originally that still haven't bolted, and I think I know what varieties they are. So I actually bought some separate seed packets just to be sure for next year, because those lettuces are still going and haven't bolted. And I do have a couple of bolting lettuces, but I have a lot of lettuce out there. Again, succession sowing, so we're always in lettuce. It was by late December going into January that I actually wondered, did I plant too many greens? My husband and I do eat, like I said, a lot of lettuce, a lot of salads, but we also eat a lot of cooked greens, and I have a lot of different mustards out there, Asian greens, and a lot of it was actually my experiment of saving my own seed and what would happen if I did that. So actually, a lot of the garden was made up of those plants. But there was a point I thought, this might be too much. And I was reminded again how when the bugs started rolling in, when things just started to warm up, a lot of the pests started getting those greens. And, you know, I did some chop and drop then, try to eat up a lot of the greens that we saw that were good for the time being. That's when I harvested my Chinese cabbage I was so excited about and found out they were infested. I had no idea, like I said, until I harvested them that they were infested with aphids. But I did do the succession sowing of the cabbage, and we found out I can do that. And something I discovered accidentally was to harvest my cabbage earlier, my Chinese cabbage. I harvested the one in the bed that you saw on the tour because I didn't want the bugs to get them. And the rib, the middle part, not really the stem, I guess that is the leaf rib. It was very thick, very crisp, very tender. The leaves were less of a fuzziness, like some of the Chinese cabbages I've grown. I mean, when you cook it, you don't taste the fuzziness at all, but there was just a better taste, better texture. I absolutely loved it. And I went to go order more, and that's when I realized this didn't look like the cabbage I grown. And that's when I realized too that I think it's because I harvested it early. The leaves are a little different than the head part of the Chinese cabbage itself. So I learned amongst all that maybe I want to harvest my cabbage earlier, and if I do, perhaps I'll even get more Chinese cabbage, because in starting them in containers, in harvesting them early, and succession sowing, maybe I can get more Chinese cabbage that way. So that was a really, that was a happy accident, I'll say that. And a reminder to myself at the harvests is a lot of what we harvest is what is growing through our summertime. And summer is my most difficult time. Sometimes I feel weird giving garden tours out to a weedy garden and where it feels like nothing's happening. It feels like I'm harvesting nothing, but really a lot of what I'm going to harvest later is growing then. So we've been harvesting a lot of our root crops, like our cassava, which, like I said, I was learning how to preserve it. We harvested our taro and had some success. I did have some taro roots be a little more slimy after cooking them. Some were just perfect, but yeah, some had that sliminess, and I'm not sure. I'm still trying to learn when to harvest them. But again, something grown in summer that we're harvesting in the fall and winter. It actually made me think to myself, and I'll mention it here, is I do grow turnips and rutabagas, but with all our tropical root crops that we're harvesting in, maybe I won't grow turnips and rutabagas next year. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. Also, I'm very proud of myself going into spring is I'm making decisions pretty quick on chopping and dropping what plant I'm going to leave and what plant I am not. Because they're all bolting, they're all flowering, and they look beautiful. Don't get me wrong, but for myself, I know if I let everything go and don't start working on it, it's going to get very overwhelming for me very fast. And I need to have a stronghold in on the garden because it's going to get crazy as the season goes on. So I'm very proud of myself for just making those quicker decisions. Something I forgot to mention in the review, I can't believe it was a big deal, is our onions. I sowed them from seed. I re-sowed some of them just to make sure we had enough and got them in the garden, and the bugs just nipped at them. And we only have maybe about 2 bulbing onions in a pot that we had done, along with one of our red Italian ones. And for our green onions, that too got attacked by bugs in another container, so we only have a few plants. And another thing that I didn't mention that was a big part of this season was our containers that we were growing in. A lot of our broccolis, the leaves started fading, they weren't growing right, and in fact with one of my plants I actually tugged on it and the entire thing came out with rotted roots. Even though there were some roots that were trying to make it, it just wasn't doing that well. And it could have been the grubs that I saw in there, but it also could have been that the soil was very densely moist, and you need fluffy moist soil so that way it doesn't suffocate your roots. So I'm wondering if that happened. And with our onions, I have learned last year in a food container garden that I have done, that soil was also very dense and wet and just not good, and our onions had rotted last year. But what really saved them in the food container garden was that I planted lettuce in with it. So with the onions in the containers, I did put lettuce in there, and then our jicama plant that just came up from the roots that I did not expect, also very wet, dense soil, so I stuck lettuce around that as well. But with our broccolis, I just didn't notice it in time, so that didn't happen. They rotted out. But like I said, it could have been the grubs. We just don't know. It just was not the year for broccoli. And what was really strange was I've grown food last year and the season after with, our peppers and other crops, and things were fine, so I'm not quite sure what's going on with our containers. But that was a big part of the season. Another thing that happened this season that I thought was a big deal was our fire pit, and we always burn our yard waste in there, and we use that as recycling things in the garden to put back into the garden. And we use biochar with that, the wood ash, that stuff that helps put minerals and nutrition back in your soil. And had some issues with that. I did a video that explains everything. It is called Turning Lemons into Garden Greens, so if you want to check that out. It is about us turning our fire pit into another garden bed and why we did that. But hey, we grew a lot of good stuff in that garden bed this season. I thought that was a big deal. And how could I forget Lunabelle and her obsession with peas? My goodness, I'm gonna have to do something absolutely different next year, because where I do grow my peas, she has taken every single fruit off of there and has been taking out the plants. So if it's anything like Minu, my other dog, and her love for sunflowers, we're just not going to be able to grow peas where we did this year. So next year we'll have to do something different. So that was a lot of our season, a lot of the good, the bad, the lessons learned. Overall this season, I'm just not ready to be done. So that's a good sign. The big theme being to just do it. Just get out in your garden. Just get started. You really learn as you grow. It's not always gonna feel pretty. It's not always gonna look pretty. It's not always gonna be perfect. It never is. Even for those that you may watch and you think they've got it all together, I can guarantee you that is not the case. But they're still getting a lot of harvests, and you can too. And it is end of winter now as I'm filming this still, and we're still getting a lot of harvests and a lot of chopping and dropping, getting things ready for spring. I even have some spring seedlings out there. So definitely still moving things along and still having that uncertain feeling of my seedlings as I do every year. Oh, and here comes Lunabelle to remind me that it is her meal time. So as I go, I just thank you for joining me in this garden review. I hope it's been a help to you. Yeah, be sure to subscribe and join us as we go, as we grow, because we're always learning. I know, you're ready. I'm coming. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.